we live in a time of raised stakes. We have a war in Ukraine, we have an energy and a climate crisis, we have a global pandemic at our hands, and topping all of this off is galloping inflation. So negotiations becoming more and more important by the minute. It's not just about salaries and promotions, it's very much about the future of our planet, of our species, of everyone around us. So what better place to discuss all of this than the N conference happening here in Zurich. My name is Klaus, I'm the editor-in-chief of the German language edition of Forbes, and we're proud first-time partners of the N conference hosted by the Schranner Negotiation Institute, trying to teach business leaders, government representatives, and everyone who's interested in how to negotiate better, more clearly, and with the best end result. I'm joined today by Matthias Schranner, who's the founder of the Schranner Negotiation Institute, a police and FBI-trained top negotiator, one of the best in the world, and certainly in the German-speaking region. And we'll be talking a bit about what makes a good negotiation, what makes a bad negotiation, and what all these handy tools that we can learn, how these can help us in solving the crises of the future. Matthias, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
I already said it. We have quite a tricky situation at the moment. We have a war in Europe, in Ukraine. We have energy crisis. We have inflation. We have all of these things. So as I said, the stakes are raised. Do you think that negotiation is becoming ever more important in these times?
Definitely. It's becoming more important and more difficult. And most managers and politicians, they are not prepared for difficult negotiations. And for this difficult negotiation, you need a different approach, you need different strategies, different tactics, you need a different team setup. And what we try to do with our negotiation conference here in Zurich, we try to translate the knowledge, the experience, for example, from FBI, from law enforcement, to business and politics, because based on our vision, we should learn from each other, we should share our experience.
So when you hear negotiation, usually people think about their next job, salary, maybe negotiating a small price increase with the handyman. Is it the same thing when you negotiate your salary as when you're negotiating with a government, in a hostage situation? Is it always the same setup?
From my perspective, yes, because there are some principles. And most people think a negotiation is just between you and me sitting at the table, and the one with the best argument will win. However, you negotiated, or you mentioned governments. If you support a government, there are hundreds of stakeholders. There are so many parties involved. So it's very complex and complicated. However, the principles are the same. So you need a clear target. You need to negotiate in a very strategic way. So not by intuition, you need to negotiate by your strategy, and you need tactical steps. And what we see very often, that there is no clear negotiation process, that they mix it up. And you need to approach a negotiation always in 3 different steps.
So is this one of the key misunderstandings that people have about negotiation situations, that they need to convince someone with the best argument, they need to be prepared instead of just having fun with the process?
Exactly. So what we see very often, that they believe if I do have a good argument, then I can convince you. And this doesn't work. Because if I think I'm right and I believe you are wrong, you just have to understand my position. And then I say, we do have a contract, or I have done a great work last year. This is why I want more money for next year. So I try to convince you that my position is right. This is not a negotiation. The target of a negotiation is not to convince you. The target of a negotiation is to solve a conflict, is to reach an agreement, which is completely different.
So you would say that what is it that makes a successful negotiation and what is it that makes a failed negotiation? When an agreement isn't reached, or win-win is often cited, what's in your mind the key factor here?
Yeah, win-win is possible if both parties believe in win-win. So if both parties have the same understanding of cooperation, of partnership, of fairness, then it's possible. I'm a former hostage negotiator. In a hostage taking, there are different values. My negotiation partner on the other side, a hostage taker, he or she, they have a completely different understanding of cooperation or fairness. And in such a situation, there is no win-win. Then I need to negotiate for my win because I need to win. I need to get the hostage out of this situation. This is a completely different understanding.
you learned your craft starting your career at the police. You went into you raised through the ranks. In the end, you led some pretty tricky hostage situations. Give us a bit of an idea of what you learn in this quite tough school of negotiating that you can now pass on to business leaders or whoever comes to you.
Well, there are some principles. The first one is you shouldn't be emotionally attached. If I'm emotionally attached, if I'm angry, disappointed, upset, then I make mistakes. The second one, you need to avoid an early commitment. So if I ask you for more money to raise my salary, you shouldn't say no. Because if you say no, you close all the doors. You shouldn't say yes, because if you say yes, then you have to give in. So you need to avoid this early commitment, because we are just at the starting point. Another principle is that I should not try to convince you with an argument. I need to come up with the demand. So I need to say what I want. Because if I say what I want, then I force you to say what you want. And then we have a conflict. And then we can negotiate, because it's all about solving this conflict. And the most important one from our perspective is I need to make sure that you can save your face. So I need to be very respectful. And this is what a lot of people, there's a huge misunderstanding. They believe a negotiation in a police environment, law enforcement, is harsh or very, let's say, aggressive, which is not the case. A negotiation under pressure in this difficult situation needs to be respectful. So the most important and the most critical element of a negotiation, I need to make sure that at the end of the negotiation, you need to save your face.
Sometimes saving face is a good phrase. Sometimes it's about small things. I think there's an anecdote where you let one of the hostage takers leave the hostage situation in a fireman's uniform, so he wouldn't be, wouldn't have to confront all the by watchers. Exactly. Talk a bit about how small things can make a big difference.
This is very important, because especially the small things make the big difference. And you mentioned the firefighter uniform. This is what we used very often in the police environment. So for someone, let's say, who is about to commit suicide, jumping from a building, or a hostage taker in a bank, what we offered at the end of the negotiation to say, okay, well, so here's what we can do. If you agree, so if you come out of this building, if you come inside the building, for example, then we will hand over a firefighter uniform. So we will dress you looking like a firefighter. You can leave the situation looking like a firefighter, and you can save your face. And this is so important, that at the end of the negotiation, we need to make sure that you can save your face.
You mentioned before that it's important, or one of the key principles is not getting emotionally attached to the negotiation, to the subject. But I mean, in a hostage situation, or if you're negotiating your own salary, the future of a company, your employees, I mean, it's pretty hard to stay, neutral and calm. What's a tip or a piece of advice? And are there situations where emotions can actually help you be a better negotiator?
No, not from my perspective. Emotions are important if you want to sell something, for example. If you want, as a leader, if you want to sell your vision to your team, if you want to sell a product to your client, then you need emotions. In a negotiation, you need to be very focused, target-oriented, strategy-oriented. You shouldn't come up with emotions. And this is what we see very often in negotiations, that founders, the owners of the companies, that they negotiate, that they sit at the negotiation table, which is from our perspective wrong. Because these managers, owners, founders, CEOs, they are emotionally attached, and then they make mistakes.
So your recommendation would be to appoint someone that gets a mandate, that helps you sort of push through your interests, but isn't sort of the owner of the company, because they don't have all this baggage that comes with it.
I would use different words. It's more like, if you're the CEO, if you're a founder, you're always afraid of losing something.
Yeah.
And if you're afraid of losing something, then you make concessions. And what we try to do is we try to set up a negotiation team, always two, because this is a learning from law enforcement, from FBI. You need a so-called lead negotiator, and you need a commander. So you have a small team. And this is our advice for every CEO. Send in a small team, negotiator, commander. hand over a so-called license to negotiate, so a mandate to negotiate, and they need a clear timeline. They need to know the direction. They need to know the timeline. They need to know what's possible to negotiate without stepping in as a CEO, because this is also a huge mistake, that the CEO is handing over the license to negotiate, and then they see, oh my God, it might be difficult, and then they step in to help the negotiation team, and then they destroy everything.
You said before also that you say what you want, I say what I want, and then we sort of have a situation where we can reach an agreement. What if the other side doesn't say what they want, maybe because they don't know or they don't want to tell you? Is it then even possible to negotiate, or is that a deadlock situation?
It's not possible. It's definitely not possible. But based on my experience, if I come up with more demands, then I get a yes but or a no because. And this is also good. So if you say, I want 10% more, and then you would say, yes, but then I need to lead a bigger team. Then I know what I have to do next. Or you say, no, because during this crisis. So after getting a yes, but or a no, because, it's easier to continue. And this is the beauty about a negotiation, because if I come up with an argument, I will receive a counter argument. If I come up with a demand, I receive a demand from your side, or no because, or yes but, and then I know what I have to do.
To link it a bit to current world events, there's a big discussion going on about negotiating with Putin at the moment. Some say you shouldn't go to war, you should negotiate, you should stay in discussions. You as the expert, what's your idea? Is it past the point of negotiation in this case, or is there always room for negotiations?
So based on my learnings and my knowledge, there is not war or negotiation. It's always a combination. The war will build the ground for the negotiation. The big issue right now is that both parties believe that if there is a so-called disagreement, so if there is no negotiation at all, it's better for them. So Putin, he believes that he will win this war. And if he would start a negotiation, then the first thing what he needs to do is to make concessions. Like he needs to accept a ceasefire. And as long as he believes he can win this war, he will not negotiate. It's the same on the other side. Ukraine, with all this, they gain a lot of territory within the last couple of days. So they also do have the feeling they can win this war. Why should they negotiate? And as long as both parties believe they can win this war, there will be no negotiation.
We've also seen it in another area where there was quite a polarized debate around vaccinations and quite different positions. Is there sometimes people or groups of people where it just doesn't make sense to negotiate anymore? And how big is this group when you look, for example, at people that are anti-vaccine, just sort of on a meta level?
Well, I think there are always two levels. There's this formal, visible negotiation at the table, and there's the informal, invisible negotiation. And we see this in the conflict with Ukraine and Russia. There is no formal negotiation at the table, but of course there's a lot of diplomacy. There are a lot of talks and discussions, but these discussions are not visible. As in almost every negotiation, there is an invisible discussion going on. We call it the back channel negotiation. And if there's no possibility to reach an agreement at the table, then you need to prepare the negotiation in back channel negotiation, in invisible negotiations, to see what could be possible.
Is it, you said that usually you should send in a team of two.
Yeah.
Is this idea that two, usually men, come together, they negotiate and they have a handshake and then they go out and that's a simple thing. Is that a thing of the past? Is it usually multiple people, multilateral negotiations? And are these situations getting more complex now and in the future?
Well, so we do have the lead negotiator and we do have the commander.
Yeah.
Based on our experience, you can't lead a team under pressure if the team is too big. And from our perspective, more than 3 people is too big for a crisis negotiation. And you should not negotiate alone, because if you're alone, then you have a lot of pressure, and then you make mistakes. Of course, you do have a huge team behind you. You have experts, you have legal guys, you do have financial experts. But this is all part of the preparation. In the negotiation, only 2, we call it the FBI principles, because you need to be focused. One for the conflict and one for the big picture for the relationship.
Is Donald Trump, or was Donald Trump, a good negotiator in your view?
Yes and no. So from our understanding, especially in Europe, we do have this common understanding that we negotiate. If you don't reach an agreement, then we walk away, then we cancel a contract, for example. The Trump approach was exactly the other way around. Let's cancel the contract, and then we offer a renegotiation. And it worked in some cases. It definitely didn't work with Iran, which was a huge mistake, because he destroyed the work for, I think they negotiated for 12 years for this contract, and he destroyed everything, because he believed if we walk away from this deal, we will get a better deal. But as you know, he was not re-elected, so there was no time for a new negotiation. And this is why we have a very difficult situation in Iran right now, because they don't stick to the agreement, because they told the Americans, why should we stick to agreement? You walked away. It was your fault.
Is there a sort of a type of negotiator? Are there different types of people that go into, or is it like everyone is the same? What's your experiences in this area?
Well, I have a very simple category. I do have the so-called rational negotiators and the gamblers. Rational negotiators, they believe in cause and effect. So 1 + 1 is 2. If I see the rise of a raw material, I need to ask for a higher price. I have done a great job in the past. This is why I ask for more money in the future. So it's always cause and effect. This is the rational negotiator. The gambler, he or she, they enjoy the game. They come up with an irrational demand because it's fun. They enjoy the conflict. They want to play the game. And so based on my experience, if the rational negotiator is negotiating with the rational one, everything is fine. Gambler with gambler, also fine. So good agreement and a lot of fun. Rational negotiator with a gambler, the rational negotiator will lose. Because he or she will be emotionally attached, so upset about this gambling strategy. And if you're emotionally involved, then you make mistakes. So yes, there are 2 types. And also based on the culture you're in, as you know, in China or in Netherlands, these negotiators are very often gamblers, from my perspective, with good intention. They love to play the game. In Austria, Germany, Switzerland, the German part of Switzerland, most of them are very rational and have no understanding why should they play the game. Because if I know I'm right and I have a contract, why should I negotiate?
But what's your advice to people that feel like they're more rational, more sort of neutral? But what I understood from what you said, gambling and liking the situation is an advantage. What's your advice? Can you change yourself, or should you bring someone in that is a gambler to negotiate for you?
No, you can learn it. You can learn it. It's you could play poker. This is what I do. I play poker with my kids. Then you learn poker face. You learn not to react if your opponent party is going all in. You can negotiate in other places, like in a supermarket, for example, or in a restaurant. You could ask, can I get the aperitif for free today? So, and then you develop this feeling that you can ask for something, and then you can create this conflict. The big target is the best negotiators I know, they are able to enjoy the conflict. So they create a conflict, like, can I get an aperitif for free today? And then there's a conflict, and there's this, and then they enjoy it. And this is, I think, the achievement of great negotiators. they are not afraid of negotiating a conflict. They love to negotiate a conflict.
If you say 100% is the perfect negotiator, how much of that is a craft that you can learn, and how much of that is natural talent that's just not given or not given?
Definitely, from my perspective, 80% you can learn, because it's there's no magic tool. You can learn how to set an agenda, how to bring in a demand, how to handle an irrational demand from the other side. These are techniques you can learn. And for the remaining 20%, you might have talent, or I have no idea, but I think, or I'm sure that you can learn a lot.
Is there a gender bias in negotiating? Are women better, worse than men, or is it all the same? Does it depend on the type you are?
So my categories is rational and gambler. I don't separate man and woman, and there might be a difference, but this is not my category, because I believe if you love to negotiate a conflict, then it doesn't depend on gender.
Who's the best negotiator you've ever experienced, witnessed, talked to, heard of?
A lot. So definitely, so today, like I talked to Phil Andrew, former FBI negotiator. These guys, they have all of them have the same approach. They give you the feeling that you're in a bubble with them. You don't see or hear other guys. You're so focused. They give you the feeling that in this second you're the most important one, and they try to get you into their world. They talk in a very positive way about you, praising about your achievements, and they give you the feeling that you are the hero in this conversation. And this is why I really love to be here at our negotiation conference, because we always invite the best negotiators in the world, and all these professional negotiators have the same approach. They give you the feeling that they're very humble, and they give you the feeling that you are the hero in this second.
You always have a motto for the conferences this year. It's the 5%. Tell us a bit about what these 5% are and why that's important in negotiation situations.
Yeah. So you mentioned it before. We are in a very unique situation, because there are so many crises coming up together, like the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the rise of energy costs and all that stuff. We are in difficult negotiations, because there is no time to wait. Because usually you can wait, let's say, 3 months for the next negotiation, or you could say, well, let's meet in half a year, and then I'm sure we will reach an agreement, which is not possible. You need to negotiate now, because you need a result now, and this is why this so-called window of opportunity is not open for a longer period of time, and this is why you need to negotiate now, which is a lot of pressure for all the parties. And this is what we have experienced. Most companies, most managers, they are able to negotiate 95% of their negotiation, but not the remaining 5%. And right now, almost every negotiation is in the remaining 5%, because almost every negotiation is really, really difficult.
I have a final question. When you look at younger people that are really on sort of in the public eye, Fridays for Future might be an example, that are really pushing, that are Greta Thunberg is standing in front of world leaders and saying, you guys failed, clean up your mess. Are you optimistic when it comes to negotiating what you want when you look at the younger generation?
Yes and no.
For what you want, etc.
Yes and
or
no.
looking at your children.
Yeah.
Whoever,
yes and no. So definitely yes, because also my kids, I'm a father of 4 kids, they are very engaged, also with Fridays for Future, climate change and all that things. So yes, because they are fighting for a better future. No, because their job is not to negotiate. Their job is to create this awareness that we adults, politicians, that we need to negotiate to create a better world. And this is what I see, a lot of frustration in this younger generation, because they believed if they come up every Friday, with this demonstration, with showing the world, you need to do something. There's a lot of them, there is a high level of frustration, because they believed that we adults, that we adapt and that we get things done, but nothing happened. And then the pandemic, and now the war, and now climate change is on the list on topic number 28 and not number 1 anymore.
Matthias, thank you so much for taking the time and for your experiences and insights.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.